own meal prep. I know there's something that that Shani contends with a lot in her practice is, is New Yorkers who do no meal prep on their own, and everything is either ordered in, or it's seamless, or it's I'm stopping off and getting something.
Or like you have to
prepackaged.
adjust their lifestyle around the menus that are available to them, versus like it's not going to be realistic that they're going to be in their kitchen cooking.
Sure.
Now they're actually, it's funny, I talked to a client last night, and she and I both were on the same page about she's got such a structured routine around her eating, her mindfulness, her exercising every day, that she wasn't able to have established before. She's like, I love this quarantine. She's like, even if it were to end tomorrow, I would not want to stop, because I want to make sure I do this forever.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
It's funny, I'm seeing the same thing, and one of the guys that I train on a regular, he's like a managing director at a big bank, and so his lifestyle is really hectic, and same sort of thing. Like prior to being quarantined, one, he's at his place in the city, which is, most people are in like apartments, and then it's a small space, and two, you're not doing a lot of meal preparation. Your lifestyle's hectic. He's on call nonstop, getting like 3 a.m. calls. And now that we're in the quarantine, he's like out east. He's in like the wilderness. He's like running 3 times a week and alternating that with like 3 times a week of like strength work. More consistent than ever, cooking all of his meals. And this is like, he's like, I don't want this to end.
Yeah, for sure. I was telling Wes yesterday when we spoke, I think what it's really doing is giving people back what they didn't even know they were missing in terms of what's important about just how they take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Who they're able to be now that they've essentially filled their own cup first.
Yep. I think we also kind of saw some phases to this, just as there was definitely a lot of, well, at least from what I understood from my clients, a lot of stress eating in those first couple of days. A lot of people just kind of got as much as they could. They weren't really planning as much. But now, as time has kind of gone on and we're a couple weeks into this, now I'm starting to hear people really wanting to get back into what we know is successful, which is routine, some type of giving your body some sort of like a grounding feeling through their food, you know.
Yeah.
And also we're programming, they're training hard. You know, we have people 3 times a week. I mean, the volume is there. And so the same things that we have to take into consideration when we're training in the studio is we need to get those macros in, making sure protein is still a focus that we're getting, and kind of making sure that we mold that into our thought process now.
Yeah, definitely, that they're recovering. Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen people go, just like you said, you know, they're now starting to realize that this might last a little longer than they thought. And then it gets real. It gets real in terms of, I got to step up now.
Yeah,
I got to actually step up, or I'm going to get left behind when all this lifts. Do I want to be the same person that I've always been? I think a lot of people are having that wake up call.
And I think we have just naturally across the board, as far as income and feeling secure, and you're feeling confident in what type of income and how much you can spend weekly on food, right? So being more mindful of that. I always think that operating a little bit more towards being lean forces you to kind of leave out the extras, right? So like, how can I be the most efficient with my budget at the grocery store, which was maybe not necessarily the thought process before. Maybe there was a little bit more leniency. I could get this, I could get that, I can splurge on that. I'm really hoping that, again, the more efficient, the more lean you're operating at the grocery store, we see that play out in your eating habits as well.
Yeah.
Well, we've been doing that too here, because when we moved, one of the things that we were looking at was really adhering to a budget and making sense of spending. And I used to be at the grocery store in New York like maybe 3 times a week, and it was going it was going to the smaller grocery store near our apartment twice a week, and then going to Trader Joe's once a week, and then and I had it as, well, we eat a lot and we need food, and we're not gonna cut back on the amount that we eat and go on like a starvation diet. Like, I'm not cutting right now. I need to eat. And to Shani's major league credit, she just broke everything down into, okay, well, this is what we're spending, and let's just try to. But so now, what's been fantastic is we're now at the grocery store once a week. That's our once a week outing, and we're really looking at, well, how can we be budget conscious but really make a game out of it too, and figure out how we can get the best quality food and really what we need also to accommodate our lifting lifestyle, albeit with resistance bands right now.
Eric, is this conversation going to you starting to hunt, and that there's going to be like an elk head in the back?
Should be. We should.
I know. In the woods of North Carolina.
What I should do is I should just have a skinned elk hanging from our balcony.
Yeah, we'll put it behind us next time.
I honestly, I see it.
There are all those 20-year-olds out. Let those 20-year-olds know.
Yeah.
just antlers hanging off.
Scare them. Then you get 2 bangs.
Yeah. Like a pull-up bar. Yeah.
Yeah, using the antlers as a pull-up bar is the most hardcore thing.
Yeah.
But we're actually not far from that. I think Paul, Wes, and myself, we're all doing one of those, like something similar to like that butcher box, right? We're getting. I mean, I think Wes might have been doing it earlier, and Paul might have been doing it earlier than me, but I was never getting this amount of meat. But I couldn't think of a better setup right now, is that butcher box, and I'm actually splitting it with a family member, and it's just kind of working out great.
Yeah.
Nice. We have to find something like that around here, because there's so much. We can finally have access to venison and game meat. We just need to find who has it. I mean, when we got here, we were going to the farmer's market, and there are 4, maybe 5 purveyors of grass-fed beef. I was getting ground grass-fed beef at like $5 or less a pound. Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
That's cheap. That's awesome.
Let me ask you guys. So you've mentioned, people have taken advantage of this time, like, using this opportunity kind of to improve themselves and find things to kind of better themselves. What have you guys done, like, to kind of take advantage of this time? I know I have some things that I've definitely, come across that I've had more time to do.
Mm-hmm.
Wes could say the same. What do you guys think? What's something that you guys took advantage of?
I really took on, when Eric had the first few cancellations of his seminars. I mean, I pay attention to what's, to the news a lot more than he does. And I'll kind of report back to him like, hey, this is getting serious. Mm-hmm. So that's when I really cracked into our budget. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of YNAB, but I love it. It's my favorite ever budgeting tool. And I just broke down, where's our money going? And from there, realized we were spending a significant chunk of that, like we were just talking about, on food. Mm-hmm. And looking at, okay, we're not actually doing the work to have a structure in place. So we need a structure around our grocery trips. Because when we lived in New York, we're going every other day. And it would drive me crazy. Yeah. I'm like, we need to actually plan this out, but we never put in the work to do it. And now there was a sense of urgency behind not only being mindful of how we were spending our money, but also being able to keep ourselves and others safe by not just venturing out aimlessly. And so I love putting in structures, and I started a spreadsheet that's full of formulas, and it's got all of our day-to-day foods and portions written out, here's what we typically eat, and here's our dinner menu for the week. And so from that, it just, it ends up populating a shopping list that we use each week. And then I'm able to go online and I clip coupons, and it becomes like a game.
Nice.
We go to the grocery store, like, okay, let's take a look. How much do we save on those ribeyes this week? How much do we, this one's 2 for 1, find this brand. And it became fun instead of significant or like a point of contention within the relationship even. It created harmony and balance.
Right.
And, so I would definitely say that that's been a huge change, a huge shift that we've made in the past couple weeks. And it's, that's been great. Well, something we'll keep up forever.
And the key to that too is the gamification and turning it into something that you want to do, because there's a huge psychological and emotional difference between, oh, we can't buy this, versus, okay, what can we get this week also? Because it's not as though the supermarket is out of food, and it's not as though we're impoverished where we have to say, oh, we have to, buy grade C meat. It's like, all right, what can we get this week that fits our budget and that is actually, good, high quality food too. So that, like, for example, we got 2 weeks ago, we got an entire 12-pound turkey that was on sale. We got the 12-pound turkey would cost us like $4 and change.
Yeah, I love that.
You can make like a ton of food with a turkey. Like,
Oh, that was 4 days of lunch afterwards also.
Really good quality.
Thanksgiving goes 5 days.
Yeah.
Right. It was like all those Easter turkeys on sale. It was like,
that's awesome.
Do that.
A lot of cooking beforehand, or you guys find?
Oh yeah, we were cooking the majority of our meals. When I was in the city 3 days a week, I was buying food in the city, but right there, that's like, even on the cheap end, you're looking at like $45-50 a week, and that's on average. I was just eating in the city once. I was eating lunch and then coming home. So that's a big deal. So cooking was not something that was new to me. I like it a lot better now because it doesn't feel as rushed. And she's cooking a lot more now because she hated our old kitchen.
Oh, I hate it.
You guys in Manhattan? You guys were in Manhattan, or?
We were in Queens. Yeah, and so it was one of those kitchens that was had been converted from the previous owner's laundry room. So it was tiny, and it had narrow. This little sink, and it wasn't conducive for washing dishes or like proper cleanup. And so I got really used to eating food on the go, but I would know where, and I think that was really beneficial in working with my clients, because it was like, hey, I hate my kitchen. I'm not going to expect you to cook up a storm every Sunday and put everything in Tupperware for the week. Mm-hmm. So let's look at what we can do. And it came down to knowing how to be able to get the food that I needed to get for whatever my goal was within, just a 1 block radius, because everything was on the go. Got to make it fast. Got to hurry up. Oh yeah, it's been a few hours. I need to eat something.
Yeah, that's totally relevant to a lot of our clients, because a lot of our clients are New York City residents, and they kind of deal with the same issue, that you were dealing with them not having like full-size kitchens. Yeah. What are some strategies like you can tell them now? Like, let's say, they have a kitchen like, the size of a closet. They don't like to shop for food. They don't know where to start. Like, what's some practical things you can kind of advise them on? Well,
the first thing that I think of is when you're in a situation like that, it becomes mindful of, it becomes a situation of, you want to stay mindful of the snacks that you're choosing. So do they have fruits and vegetables on hand, or do they have chips on hand? Right. Is it chips and wine, or is it actually things that are in alignment with their goals. I don't like to refer to anything as good or bad. It's like something's going to bring you closer to where you want to be, or it's not. And so I always take a look there when I do work with people. It's like, what kind of food do you have on hand? Let's start there. And if you're not going to make a full meal, then let's look at, does it make sense for you to stock up on deli meat, to keep hard-boiled eggs around, to keep beans? Like, you know, what are you willing to do? And I always start there with people, like, what are you willing to do? And quite often, a few weeks of doing those things will start to build upon that they want to do a little bit more. You know, they'll want to maybe cook rice with their chicken, or, you know, with their deli meat, or, you know, whatever it may be. But it's like, you gotta get real with yourself about what are you keeping on hand and what are you reaching for when you're at home, especially now.
Absolutely.
I just drink Budweiser out of a straw made out of a fruit roll-up.
It does.
Well, you live
Well, Shani, something
like 6 days a week, so.
Shani, something that you said before that I think probably is especially helpful even prior is letting your budget also be a determining factor as well, right? So, and including wine and liquor in that. I mean, I think it's everyone's loving it. You know, they're doing virtual happy hour, which is great. But making sure that you're aware of like really where your money is going in regards to food. Deli meat, I think, when you mentioned it, it definitely it's not maybe sometimes like the most ideal staple, but it will stretch, and kind of looking at what high value products can I get, like what's going to get me to go the furthest, and what's going to give me the highest nutritional value at the same time. And I think when you look at those two things, chips won't bring you there. You know, they're definitely cost effective, but they won't kind of check off both boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think also for some people, I've noticed that they've been able to get a lot more sleep during this time as well. And so that has, you know, I was talking to Wes about this yesterday. That's been a game changer for a lot of people, in that they didn't know what they were missing. It becomes so, and I've done it before too. You know, my background is corporate, and I've done the wake up at 5 a.m. to commute and home at 8 p.m., 9 p.m. and can't sleep until 1. And so it's like when you start to get to know yourself when you've had sleep, and you just, you know, there's a clarity, there's a focus, there's an energy that may not have been there before.
100%. I think that's the one thing I'm noticing big time, just the amount of sleep I'm getting and the amount of focus I have, not just like dealing with, you know, my friends and family, just also clients. Like I'm so much more present. I'm so much more, you know, just there and energized to help people. And I'm hoping people kind of get that out of this time here. Like sleep is very underrated for performance with, you know, not just job, but also relationships.
We got some guests on the Facebook Live. So I just want to say hi to everybody. And Jazz actually asked a question. She was, this is something that I think we can all probably answer in our own way, but it's, is there a major difference nutritionally between cooking something on the stove versus baking? So,
Baking?
Yeah, baking versus on the stove. I'll just take a stab at it first. Is you know, generally on the stove, you know, you're going to be cooking on a pan, and you're going to need some sort of oil. So you're adding calories in that standpoint. And then, you know, versus baking, most of the time you're not going to need that. So a little bit healthier, especially when it comes to like proteins. And then also with baking, you're going to render off a lot of like fat as well. And then, so when you take that out, you're not going to be consuming that. So baking generally a little lower calorie. What's tastier? Maybe on the pan. adding a little
oil. That's pretty
um,
good.
yeah, so there's pluses and negatives, and it depends on where you're at in your program. I think it just depends on the person. It depends what you're trying to get out of it. What do you guys think?
For sure. It depends on what's being made. And I think right away, I have this dish I make called a beef bake.
It's the
And I
greatest
bake
dish
it.
on the planet.
I bake it, but I know it's like a layer of I've got grass-fed ground beef, put broccoli on top, I mist it with a little bit of oil. It gets like crispy, and underneath it is a layer of rice. And we love it. But I know if I were cooking that on the stove, I'd be tempted to use a little more oil. And that's just me. That could be a lot of people. It's easy to overdo the oil when you're cooking on the stove.
And we're just using the cooking spray also. So it's, a second and a half of the coconut oil spray, or the olive oil spray, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really depends on what you're making. If you're baking something that requires butter, for example, then it might be comparable in calories.
It really just depends, I guess, on your situation, right? Like, I think sometimes, people are kind of looking for like the hard and fast rule about what's right or wrong, but I guess, it depends on what you're cooking, what your goals are, and
Completely.
what, you have access to, like you said. So I think kind of bringing us to this point about me and Christine are precision level 1 certified.
Mm-hmm.
I know you are precision level 2.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some thoughts on that level 2 programming?
Yeah, the level 2 is a year-long program, and you get paired up with a precision nutrition coach. I had Coach Adam Feit was my direct coach.
Right.
And what it really goes into is the behavior behind the science. You've got the science, which precision nutrition level 1 is fantastic about evidence-based nutrition coaching. Here's the evidence, and here's what we're saying we know to be true. Now, level 2 takes it to here's how to actually implement that in your day-to-day life so it becomes part of you. It becomes your lifestyle. It's not me telling you what to do as a coach, but it's actually taking a look with another person to say, what does your lifestyle look like and where do you want to go? So it really gets into depth about the types of questions that you would ask somebody. And it's relevant to all industries too. The cool thing is that there are a lot of people who participate who are not nutrition coaches or not fitness coaches. And it's really great at laying out what would have somebody make the changes that they say they want to make. Because I know we as coaches all come up against that. You have somebody who says they want to do X, but the actions that they take are completely not aligned with X. Right. So it gets you really in the weeds of what would have somebody make changes that last.
Yeah, I think that's the most challenging part, right? When we're coaching, especially like nutritionally, just kind of coercing people toward the right actions and kind of holding people accountable to that action without coming across like you're judging them.
Yeah.
And you can instantly kind of, start to defend themselves and revert back to some talk that reinforces past behaviors. So that's something that we've been, trying to stay aware of and try to come across as non-judgmental as possible. And it's been tough. I think that's the hardest challenge in terms of nutritional coaching. What do you think about that?
I actually think, just to add to that, I think in addition to not coming off judgmental, I think as well as a lot of coaching right now is just simply unlearning, right? So like because there's so much information out and people have been trying with nutrition for what you would imagine you learn in what you're seeing when you're dealing with the behavioral. This is long time. These are decades of habits with emotional attachments to it and people having effort and putting years into trying to find out what works best for them, and learning as, I mean, everybody that we come in, I mean, all of our clients, they're doing the best they can with what they have, right? And they fall, you know, everybody falls short sometimes. So I think a lot of it, at least, is kind of getting back down to unlearning so much that that you kind of put in over the years.
Completely. And I think, you know, our overriding commitment in all of it is that we are committed to their success. And, you know, we're human beings also. It could definitely be easy to like, the first instinct for me when I first started out, I would definitely say before level 2, was judgment, or looking back at myself as a coach and saying, well, what's wrong with me? I can't get these people the results they want. I'm telling them all the information and they're not doing anything with it. And you know, it's just, Christina, like what you said, it's decades of emotional attachment, and it has nothing to do with us as coaches. For the people who are going through it, it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with, like, their feelings about themselves, their feelings in the face of adversity or setbacks. You know, how many of us have had clients who have the F it moments and they just go on a binge, and they just have it that they're not good enough to have the success that they say they want. Or there's just all this stuff that for us, it's just all about untangling all of it. It's like, no, here's, you know, what actually is going on, and here's all the stuff that, you know, is just noise. It's just background noise.
Yep. I think remembering our emotional connection to food as a starting point is probably huge. It'll probably yield you probably the most honest results and honest answers as far as what your habits are and how you got to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I talk about too, is like, because I come from, you know, yo-yo fad dieting all my young life. You know, I was almost 220 pounds by the time I was 18 years old, to becoming a bikini competitor, becoming, you know, disordered eating, just the textbook, like, through and through, tried it all, anything you can imagine. And what I really get from that is that it has nothing to do with the food, ever. Ever. And I used to draw out macros for people and give them caloric recommendations, and they wouldn't follow it, or they would follow it and it wouldn't be what they wanted, as far as their own results. And then it really just got like, this has nothing to do with the food.
Right.
This is like, what is going on for them that hasn't been, you know, we all have that stuff. We all have, you know, I always relate it back to myself. Like, I've got stuff that I'm not actively at work on in my own life. So it's like, I can relate to my clients that way.
Mm-hmm.
And say, like, okay, what is it going to take? What are you willing to do? How did we get here? And how can we, you know, how can we just get back to basics of what does that look like for you?
Right.
I mentioned it before, but I have to say it again. Probably, I think when you're combating the hard wiring of emotional habits, I think having the systems in place probably are some of the best ways to kind of short circuit that, is having easy systems to follow and making it super simple, and not having to, again, the simplicity of it probably is what's going to but allow you to kind of be able to be aware and maybe bob and weave some of those things that pop up, especially stress is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like digestible, almost like stupid easy, where they're asking like, what? How is this going to make a difference? And then they find out, you know, I always go through that with the sleep conversation, where people right off the bat, they tell me, oh, I sleep on average 4.5 hours a night, but I feel great. Okay, well, like, do you tell me about your bedtime routine? What routine? They're like, I get in bed and I scroll through YouTube for hours. I go, okay, well, do you want to actually start with a little more sleep? Like, could you do 30 more minutes? No, I'll do 15. Okay, cool. Let's start with 15 minutes. And they're like, okay, I could do 30. And, you know, just building, it's like something like that might seem so tiny and basic, but, you know, I've got one client now who is exactly like that. She's now, even before the quarantine started, she's getting 7 hours a night of good restful sleep from like 4 to 5. And yeah, it's like starting small, starting where somebody may not even expect it would make a difference.
Shani, do you think you could talk a little bit about the connection to sleep and like cravings and eating, and just how we feel about eating in the first place? Because we have a ton of the 4 or 5 hour folks, and they're there genuinely. You know what I mean? Like a lot of them, that is just kind of their work setup. And then there's like a beating themselves over the head because, oh, I crave, you know, I was having all these cravings. And I think sometimes we lose the fact that there's a connection. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things. And that's why I always kick things off with looking at sleep. It really, really absolutely affects so much of our body and our brain, which are completely interconnected. I mean, our metabolism isn't going to function optimally if our brain isn't well. And so we really, it's for most people now, and I say most people because there are people out there who will say, you know, I get 6 hours of sleep and I'm great. And I don't argue. If somebody's like, I feel great, that's wonderful. If everything is working, meaning that, you know, say you get 4 hours of sleep and you're losing the weight you want to lose and your hunger is under control, then that's great. I mostly address where people aren't getting a sufficient amount of sleep and they are having cravings. So you really want to look at what stress does to the body. Now, you know, it's the hormones associated with stress that send signals to the body. And the first thing, there's a direct connection between the stomach and the brain. And so I'll have a lot of people report to me, oh, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Why do I want carbs? Why do I want carbs so bad?
Yeah.
And the first thing I do ask is, well, if you're craving carbs today or you gave into a pizza craving, how much sleep did you have last night? And instead of spurting the science about it, because to be honest, I'm not the science person who's going to spurt on it, you know, science at you, but I'm going to ask you, like, ask yourself seriously, are you getting the results that you want? Are you honestly getting the results that you want? Are you having cravings hit you during the day? It could be a couple different things, but if you know you haven't been sleeping sufficiently, look there first. And look at how you can incorporate an extra half hour or hour to start with into your sleeping routine. Are you scrolling first thing, you know, when you get into bed? Are you feeling groggy when you wake up? All of these factors are definitely going to play a part in how your body deals with stress. And cravings are a huge part of stress. So as we know, there are so many other things, but I always look there first. Like, and it just comes down to each person being honest with themselves. Are you getting the results you want? No. Are you sleeping sufficiently? Okay, let's look there. It's all about problem solving. And I never when I coach, I never tell people what to do. I just ask people to be open to discovering something and experimenting.
This might seem like a silly question, but could you speak to maybe what would be the difference between like a craving and what normal hunger, like what would be how would I know the difference?
That's a great question. And I have a lesson in my program that addresses this, like what is hunger and what is a craving. So if you are eating sufficient for what your goals are, now I say that very specifically because everybody has different goals, and you're getting enough sleep, and you generally have very well managed stress levels, like you have a strategy in place for managing your stress, you might be hungry. It might be hunger.
Yeah.
You have to look at, is everything in place? Is everything that I know could be in place, is that in place? It definitely becomes problem solving. Now, some of us actually really know when we're having cravings. Are there certain foods that pop into mind? Is it like an absolute, did you just eat, but you're craving something sweet? Like I have a lot of people who say, oh, I need something sweet after dinner. That is a craving. I don't deny that. That is an absolute craving. And I know a lot of people have become acclimated to needing dessert with dinner.
Sure.
You want to look at, in that case, what kinds of swaps can you make? So instead of trying to avoid the cravings, what would you consume? Like what would actually satisfy that wouldn't set you back? Because it's like the moment you try to resist a craving, it's gonna, all the stuff about I'm bad and, you know, go figure, I couldn't do it, this didn't work for me, all that stuff kicks in.
Yeah, I suppose that's the follow-up, right? Like, okay, now I've acknowledged it's a craving. This is for sure that, but I still want it.
Yeah, I still want it so bad.
Okay, great. I'm aware. I definitely, this is a craving of sugar, but okay, now what happens next, right?
Yeah.
Like you're saying it's okay to maybe lean into it, but maybe how can I acknowledge the craving, but at the same time, maybe not go all the way in?
For sure.
Would you go as far as, like, for that particular example, would you go as far as in terms of actionable items? Say, hey, you know, we're going to have a smaller portion of what you're craving for dessert, or would you go even further and say, we're going to swap it out for something like a fruit to give you that same sensory input, but with a more nutrient dense and something that's going to maybe help you work more towards your goals?
Yeah, it's usually in the beginning of working with somebody when they're really trying to make a change, I have found that it really works to have them reduce the portions. So if they're craving, you know, I had a client who had a habit of stopping off for pizza every night after he left the office, and he would eat on average 4 slices. That was his average. And so I would say to him, okay, instead of 4 slices, will you do 2? So I'm not taking, you know, we're not taking it away. We're not making it bad or maybe making it something that is forbidden. It's just like, okay, can you do 2? And then he was doing 2 until he was just like, you know what? I don't even crave it. I don't want it. And when the other things start to fall into place, as far as like they're getting adequate sleep, they're getting adequate protein and hydration throughout the day, the cravings will start to dissipate. But in the beginning, I definitely go with with smaller portion sizes. And I do make recommendations. I have a client who wanted ice cream every night after dinner. So I was like, could we experiment with something that's sugar-free? Or like, how about cottage cheese with, you know, with some almond butter and berries? And she was obsessed. She loved the swap. So, you know, it really depends on, like I like to ask somebody, what do you typically crave when you crave food? What do you crave? Like I crave meat and cheese. I love meat and cheese.
Yeah.
And like some people just want sweets. Just
Yep.
want sweets.
It sounds like, you're kind of speaking to, finding the low-hanging fruit to kind of start some long-term behavioral changes in a lot of people. I think like, talking back to, you finding ways to incorporate more sleep, whether it's like 15 minutes, and try to start kind of raising the floor on some behavioral changes for the long term. So I think that's a great strategy to kind of start some long-term changes. So I think speaking to like low-hanging fruit, we got a couple questions. We got Sunita. She's asking, what do you say to clients who are not stress eating and only eat 2 meals a day because they are just not hungry?
Great.
Right.
Great. Like,
Go Sunita.
Exactly. It's like another level of intermittent fasting almost.
Right.
If you feel great and you're reaching the goals that you've set out for yourself with your body, fantastic. There's no reason to eat just because somebody says you have to eat 4 to 6 meals a day.
Right. Like people get caught in that, like, oh, you got to eat 3 square meals a day, or breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Like, where are you hearing these things? Like,
right, exactly. I was one to do that, and for a short while, I was sponsored by a major supplement company in the bodybuilding industry, and everywhere I was, I'd have my grilled chicken in a Ziploc bag, and I'd just have Tupperware with me at all times, and it was disgusting. And I was upset all the time because I was hungry, and I was watching the clock like a hawk about when am I going to eat again. I was never satiated with any of my meals. So I personally eat 2 to 3 big meals each day. That's what I personally love to do. And if you feel good, then keep going.
I think that's a
And
good.
if you feel good eating 8 meals a day, do that too.
Exactly.
Do you feel like for people who are doing that, like let's just say it's 2 large meals a day, does it become more of a challenge to get the right, let's just call it protein intake or macronutrient composition? Because you're talking about someone who, I think most people on this and watching this are probably working out and training too. They're probably going to need a different total makeup throughout the day. So cutting your meals down, what would you tell somebody in terms of how those meals should be comprised?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it comes back to the goals, like how lasered in are you to your goal? Do you have a goal do you have to hit a certain body weight for a competition that you have coming up? Do you, or is it recreational? How hard are you training? Like one thing I did with Eric, my husband, is I had him incorporate an intra-workout nutrition of just carb powder and water while he was training, and sometimes unflavored protein to just sustain the muscle growth, and just to really nourish him throughout his workouts. And one thing that I see often is people will go to, say, a 2 meal a day nutritional strategy as a way to lose weight. And I see a lot of women do this. They say, I'm going to start intermittent fasting, for example. And then a week into it, they're like, this doesn't work for me. I can't do this. Because if you are still training, you do need calories to sustain what you're doing. So cutting calories and expecting that, you can remain in a caloric deficit over an extended period of time is, you might burn out. You might. Now, if you start to feel lethargic, if you feel like you can't get through your workouts, if you feel like you're not recovering properly, and if you've been training for some time, you know what it feels like if you're not recovering. You know that the muscle soreness lasts a little longer than you think is normal. It might be time to incorporate more protein into your meals. It might be time to incorporate some sort of nutrition during your workout, even if you eat like a banana. And I would just start there in general, just protein consumption. You really have to put yourself under a microscope and ask, am I getting the most out of each session? Is my body changing the way that I want it to? Am I building muscle? Us women.
So I think
yeah.
you will, I've almost saw, and I think it's important to be aware of the flip side of that as well, is the burnout. But sometimes, again, when you're fasting, and again, if we're not out and about as much, if we're not moving, if our commute is a lot less, we almost actually have extra energy, right? And we just spoke to how much that affects your sleep as well. So I think if you're not eating as much, we're almost running out of different energy system, not really to dive into the science of it, but being aware that that can play a role as to if you're even feeling tired at night, right? So changing your eating will absolutely change. When I first started fasting a while ago, that was something I wasn't really so prepared for, is I almost had too much energy, right? So now at that point now, I've waited, my meals are now a little bit later, I've had all this now, I just ate, oh, and now I have to go to bed? No way, And so that is something kind of I had to, and it simply just being aware of it allowed me to kind of, I was a little bit more prepared. It's like, okay, now that's something that could be coming up. It's playing out in my eating. Just awareness it sets the tone pretty much for everything in that regard.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And I did that a while ago, a few years ago. I really got into fasting, and I would do one meal a day, and it would be a meal that was just over 2,000 calories, and I planned it out. I knew exactly what was going to be in that meal, and I would have it portioned out perfectly. Now, I don't recommend everybody do this, but I'm just saying that, it's another thing, was that I had already mapped out the macros and the calories that were contained in that meal. And I made sure I got every single bit of it, because I knew the goals that I wanted to hit for my body and my training. So, you could definitely put as much planning into it as you want, essentially.
So Sunita, to answer your question, pretty much if you feel good, just keep doing what you're doing. And when we start training again, we'll kind of reassess and maybe try some different things if need be. But if you're doing good right now, I think just keep doing what you're doing. Another question from Jazz. This is the same Jazz as before, asking about the bacon question. I don't know how to phrase this, but are there oils we shouldn't really be using or should be using more than another kind? Examples: vegetable, extra virgin, avocado, coconut, etc. I know each has their own benefits to what we're cooking, like smoke point, etc. So she's asking, what are better oils, pretty much?
This is a good one. You tend to want to, as far as smoke point and carcinogenic properties that have been shown in certain oils over others, I don't pretend to be the one who did the research, so I'm not going to speak from that. But it is all in the way that fats affect the body and inflammatory processes. So macadamia nut oil, coconut oil tend to be a little better options as far as how they interact with the heat, and just avoiding things like the vegetable oil and the canola oil, things that contribute massively to inflammation within the body. I personally have an inflammatory disorder that affects my eyesight. So this is something that I am very mindful of the types of oils that I consume. And I don't consume vegetable or canola, any hydrogenated oils. He'll tell you his mom made me a Duncan Hines cake for my birthday one year, and I ate a piece, and then my eyesight blurred over.
No way! Wow.
Yeah, a Duncan Hines mixed cake made her practically blind the next day.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
It's not
wow.
exaggeration or
No,
hyperbole.
it-
That is actually what happened.
And it is an ongoing thing. So I definitely, you know, I'm able to see the firsthand effects of what it does to my body, because I actually lose a significant amount of eyesight. So I do steer clear of any cheaper oils like canola and vegetable. And I do use a lot of coconut oil. I use avocado oil and olive oil every once in a while for cooking.
Right.
it sounds like you lean more towards like more like unsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, and then really just at least like just from what it sounds like, we just don't even ingest like hydrogenated trans fats and like those cheaper vegetable and canola oils. Do you choose one over another based upon like what you're preparing, and like are you trying to extract a certain flavor, or is it the heating temperature also?
Yeah. It's funny because I started to notice when I would choose oils for the flavor meant that I was using a little too much. So I'm like, if I'm choosing like it's not my favorite, but like a butter spray, like, oh, butter to make pancakes or something. I'm gonna use a lot of that. So I stick with coconut oil. I find it to be very neutral taste for me, and like half-second spray, like exactly what it says, serving size. But I do find that if I'm pulling back if I use an oil because of its taste. I realize, oh, it's time to pull back on it.
Right. It's easy to kind of overeat.
I gotta cut out, but
Yeah, I do too. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much. This was awesome.
if you guys want to continue,
I got one more question from my boy Eric. He's a police officer. He's at NYPD. He says, why does doctors say coconut oil is not good for, but they say peanut oil is the most ideal for cooking? Is there any fact to that?
It could be smoke point. I can't honestly say that I know. I can't honestly speak from whatever study was put out regarding that.
And what doctor?
Yeah.
It's some dentist somewhere who has stock in peanut oil.
Right.
You know, that's why I always come back to the individual who's doing it. How does it make you feel? How is your overall health? Have you been to the doctor? Have you had blood work? Do you have an inflammatory condition that's exacerbated by certain types of foods? Oils are a very big culprit in those types in inflammatory disorders and triggering certain things. So, you know, I haven't seen the studies.
Yeah. I think for me personally, when I take peanut oil, I'll start breaking out. I'll start having like lower energy. So I guess it's dependent on each person. And I think doctors should all take some kind of nutrition course as well.
Yeah, because they don't.
Yeah, I mean,
Or their medical degree, some fat form or facet, you know.
yeah, exactly. You know, I know that I have a number of specialists for my eye condition. I mean, I've had it since I was 15, and with one of my doctors, I remember just telling him like, hey, you know, I know that when I eat this, it flares up and I get patches of eczema all over my forehead. And he's like, yeah, well, there's not enough evidence to say that nutrition does anything for what you have. And I'm like, I'm not asking for evidence. I'm actually telling you what's going on with me and then what I've noticed. And so that's when I really got, oh, this just is not what his world is. This is not his world. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I always bring it back to like how, like you said, Paul, if you're getting breakouts when you eat certain things, like you can pretty easily trace it back.
Probably not something that you should be eating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing I talk to a lot of people about too, is that sometimes we don't even realize the effect the food we're eating is having on us. Dairy is a very controversial one in that sense. I know working with a lot of women who are like, I just can't get rid of that puffy feeling. And if we look back, they're sleeping enough, they're hydrating enough, and they might be eating a lot of dairy. You know, we look at everything. We just kind of like go down the chain, like, all right, it's like just trying to map out.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. Just to kind of sum up, because we're a little short on time, but I think some things we could take away from this is pretty much, you know, it depends on your particular situation. And also just finding some kind of low-hanging fruit, right? Something that you can.
Yeah, celebrating the things that are simple to do. Just giving yourself compassion and credit. I think you know, it's very easy to focus on what hasn't been working, but really to look at what's been working. What are you doing now that you weren't doing before? Are you able to do push-ups? Did you get your first pull-up? You know, are you putting your phone down half an hour earlier than you were before, you know, before bedtime? Just celebrating the little tiny ways in which you've adjusted.
Exactly. Yep. And just building some wins, building some momentum, and start kind of heading toward the positive direction.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a great way to sum up. Thank you so much, guys, for your time.
Definitely.
Thank you.
both.
All right, this is fun.
Get together again when all this is over.
Yeah, absolutely. Come down to Charlotte.
I'm down to go to the south.
Environment here.
All right, guys.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye, guys.